And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a tile-laying game from White Goblin Games and Stronghold Games. That game is Voluspa by Scott Caputo. Now this is a tile-laying game, as I said, kind of like if you think Carcassonne. You're going to have tiles, you're going to play them to the table, but each time you play a tile in this game, you're trying to have the highest tile in a row or column, or both. And if you do, you're going to score points for the number of tiles in that column. The trick, or row. The trick here is that each of those tiles has a special ability, or a lot of the tiles will have a special ability, allowing you to negate the effects of other tiles or place over other tiles, zero out some of the tiles, whatever the case may be. So you need to cleverly play these tiles to the table in order to hopefully get the most points. Before I get too much into that, real quick, why don't we just take a look at what you're going to get inside the box. I will briefly cover the expansion included as well. We'll take a look at how the game plays, and then we'll come back here and get my opinions on Voluspa. So here you can see the setup for Voluspa. Now this is a tile placement game, and as I said in my introduction, the idea here is that anytime you place a tile, you want it to be the highest tile in that row or column, or both of which you place it in. There's always going to be one start tile in the center of the table. In this case, it's a 2. And each player is going to start with a hand of 5 tiles. We'll see this player has 2 8s, 2 4s, and a 3. Not real hard to beat a 2 out on the table right now. But each tile usually has a special ability. The 7s and the 8s don't, because they're such high numbers to start with, but all other tiles will have a special ability. On your turn, you're going to play one tile from your hand, and you're going to score points if it's the highest tile in the rows or columns. So let's say this player plays one of his 8s. 8 is higher than 2 in this column, so he's going to go ahead and score 2 points, because that's the number of tiles that are in the column. So green, we'll say, scores 2 points. He would then draw up and add a new tile to his hand and draws another 8. So he's got a pretty decent hand, but no special abilities to use, or at least none for the 8s, but the 4s and the 3s will have a special ability he can use later on. The next player then could either continue on this column, although an 8's a little bit hard to beat unless they replace it, or start off on a new row, but you must always place adjacent to a tile already on the board. And the other rule for placement is that a column or row can never have more than 7 tiles in it. So if you get up to 7, you can't continue that column on and continue scoring 8 or 9 points, building up a longer row or column. In addition, this will sometimes limit you in placing a tile even though you're not already at 7 or 8, because you'll run into another row, which is continued out in a different way, and that would make a row of higher than 7. So, as you do this, you're going to keep building up this grid of tiles, but each of these tiles has its different special abilities, and I'm going to cover those all right now. So Loki, the 1 tile, is of course a 1, and when you place him out onto the board, he's not going to be a very high number, but anything you place him next to is going to become a 0. So if we place Loki here, this 8 becomes a 0, and 1 is now the highest in this row. So he's going to get 2 points, and we could say that that was Blue's score. He doesn't score anything for the column because he's not in the column, so that you'll see how that works. The 2 we already see out on the board. The 2, it doesn't really matter what her score is unless she's the highest in a row or column, but more importantly is that if a 2 is ever on both ends of a row or column, you automatically score, even if she's not the highest. So let's say Loki wasn't here. This 2 isn't the highest in this column, but since she's on both sides, she's going to score the whole column and get 1, 2, 3 points. If Loki were here, she's still the highest, but if Loki's, she's actually the highest and she's on both sides, so she would score just once anyway. But it doesn't really matter. 2 and 2, she actually wouldn't be the highest, and she would score just because she's on both sides. And that's always usually going to be the case, is she'll score for being on both sides of a row or a column. The 3 here is going to be a tile that allows you to replace another tile on the board. So for example, we could say that she's going to go and replace this tile right here, picking up the tile and putting it into the player's hand that placed the tile out here. When she does so, you'll see that 8 has been zeroed out by Loki, 3 is higher than 2, so she's going to score 1, 2, 3 points on the board because she's the highest in this column. The 4 tile is going to be Fenrir. It's a wolf. And Fenrir's total power is always equal to the number of Fenrirs in the row or column that you place him in. So if we were to place him out right now, he would be a 4. But if later another Fenrir were to be placed out, that Fenrir would have a power of 8 and would be the highest in that row or column. So you want to try and get multiple Fenrirs out in an area to have a lot of power, but sometimes someone will try and zero them out for you so that they're not going to be as high. And you'll have to pay attention because sometimes you're placing these, they're both going to be 8s, and that's not going to be great for you because you want it to be the highest single tile in the area. The 5 is the dragon. The dragon comes out and he covers up a single tile in the area. So if he's going to fly out, let's say that this 8 is no longer zeroed out by Loki, he flies out and covers up the 8, and now 5 is the highest tile in this row, scoring 4 points. Now remember that you can branch off and try and score both rows and columns. So for example, if we were to branch this off like this, and then later play a tile that was higher than both the 3 and the 2, that player would be able to score both and would score 1, 2, 3, 4 points if they were able to place in an area that would allow them to do that. The 6s are going to be trolls, and trolls basically prevent you from playing anything next to them that's not a troll. So you can place this out in order to hopefully limit the ability of players to play around and hopefully benefit yourself if you're able to play more tiles next to that will let you score. The 7s and 8s have no abilities. 7 is Thor, and 8 is Odin, I believe, can't remember. But essentially you're going to play these out. They have no special abilities, but they are 7s and 8s, so they're the highest tiles in the game. So basically, now that I've covered all the tiles, the gameplay is very simple. On your turn, you play one tile from your hand. You then score anything that you're allowed to score because you have the highest tile in that row or column, and you draw a new tile to fill up your hand. And you're going to do this until all of the tiles run out and all of the tiles have been played from players' hands. And at the end of that, whoever has the most points will be the winner. Now, in addition to those tiles, there are special tiles that come in an expansion, and I'd like to cover all of those real quick. In that expansion, there are 4 different tiles. So we have Jotun, which is a giant here. He has a value of 5, and you may place him where another tile already exists in a row or column. When you do so, it's going to bump that tile to the end of the line. Still, not allowing you to make rows or columns of more than 7, but allowing you to relocate a tile, which could theoretically change its value, and then make him the highest in the row, allowing you to score points. And so there are several of these that you can mix into your game in order to add new variety. You also have Hermit here. Hermit is going to be a 3 value, but he allows you to place another tile after you place him on the board. So you could place him and then any other tile in the same row or column that you placed him in, including another Hermit, which would let you play another Hermit and so forth and so on. And you're going to score each of those tiles if they happen to be the high tiles in the row or columns that you place them in. You're going to have the Sea Serpent. The Sea Serpent is a 6, but he only scores if he is the highest number in all of the tiles in the same row or column. Now that doesn't just include continuous, but also over breaks. So any tiles that line up with him, whether continuous or broken up by gaps, must be lower than a 6 in order for this to score. This means that this tile could theoretically score more than 7, which is usually the theoretical max that you can score from placing a tile. And finally, we have Hel, the goddess of the dead. When she gets played out, she goes over another tile and essentially zeroes it out. It becomes a blank. And that is going to allow you to start new rows and columns, but is really not going to let you score anything from placing her. So you can kind of zero out a row or column in order to make a future play for yourself that maybe will score a lot of points. Now, she also doesn't count towards your hand limit, so you can have more than 5 tiles in hand while you have one of these in order to give you more options for play later. Either way, the game plays out the same. Whoever best manages over the course of the game to best use their tiles and score a lot of points is going to be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Voluspa from Stronghold Games. A pretty good tile-laying game, I must say. And I do like tile-laying games. They're not my favorite genre, but this one I enjoy quite a bit because I think it takes traditional tile-laying and adds an aspect of abstractness to it with some strategy that's pretty strong. Each of those tiles, as I said, has a number on it, and they have an ability. And of course, I say abstract even though there is a theme over this of mythological creatures and trying to outpower each other in a row. But let's be fair, those tiles could not have any names and just have abilities and it'd be an abstract game. So, as I said, pretty good strategies here. You're going to try and figure out how to best play the tiles from your hands in order to score points, but at the same time you need to be taking into consideration what tiles your opponents may have and how you can best limit them from scoring more points than you after you've placed your tile. Now, you're not always going to have perfect information here. As a matter of fact, you're not going to have a lot of information as to what's in their hand at all, unless they're picking tiles back up, and then you might have an idea of something they're holding. But you can try and limit their options based on what you know is out on the board and what's left in the draw pile. And that's going to kind of give you this idea of what you might be safe to play versus what maybe you should hold into your hand until you see something else at the table. As with any game where you're holding a hand of things and drawing from a communal pile, there's going to be some luck involved, quite a bit of luck actually, but I think using the strategy that's involved to mitigate that luck is going to be the key to this game, and I think it's one that a lot of people can enjoy. Inside that box, as I mentioned, is an expansion, so if you get tired of the base game or you think the base game is not offering enough strategic options, they've included more options for you to put in there. And all in all, I think that's always a good idea to have variable options that you can mix in order to keep things fresh. And there's another expansion out soon that hopefully I'll be, or another out now that hopefully I'll be covering soon, so you can see even more of what they've added to the game. So if that sounds good to you, this is Voluspa from Stronghold Games, a game that I definitely recommend checking out.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.